You open a blank document, you know what you want to make. You can almost see the perfect version in your head. And because it is perfect, you write nothing. That is the trap. Perfectionism looks like ambition from the outside. It looks like high standards. It looks like caring deeply about the work. But inside your brain, perfectionism can become something stranger. It can become a fear system wearing a gold medal. You do not stop because you do not care. You stop because you care so much that ordinary effort starts to feel humiliating. The first sentence is not just a sentence. It is evidence. The first sketch is not just a sketch. It is a confession. The first attempt is not just an attempt. It is a tiny courtroom where your brain thinks your entire worth is on trial. So you wait. You wait for the right mood. You wait for the right idea. You wait until you can do it properly. And while you wait, the perfect version in your head becomes brighter, cleaner, and more impossible. This is why perfectionism is so confusing. It promises excellence, but it often produces paralysis. To understand why, you have to go back to a very old human problem. Your brain was built to care about judgment. For your ancestors, being judged by the group was not a small emotional inconvenience. It could be dangerous. Humans survived in groups. To be rejected by the people around you could mean less protection, fewer shared resources, and a smaller chance of survival. So your brain learned to scan for social danger. Are they disappointed? Are they laughing? Are you falling behind? Are you about to lose your place? Today you may be sitting alone at a laptop, but your nervous system can still treat a bad draft, a failed exam, or a clumsy first try as if the tribe is watching. The tribe has become invisible. The fear is still real. This is where perfectionism begins to make emotional sense. If a mistake could make you look weak, then avoiding mistakes feels safe. If a rough draft could expose your limits, then not making the draft feels safer. If ordinary work could prove you are ordinary, then waiting for perfection feels like protection. But there is a hidden cost. You cannot edit a perfect imaginary project. You can only edit a real imperfect one. Psychologist Randy Frost and his colleagues developed one of the major measures of perfectionism, often called the Frost multidimensional perfectionism scale. It looked at pieces of perfectionism like concern over mistakes, personal standards, doubts about actions, and expectations from parents. That matters because perfectionism is not just one thing. Sometimes it is healthy striving. You want to improve. You practice, you care about quality. You can make mistakes without turning them into a personal disaster. But sometimes it becomes maladaptive perfectionism. Maladaptive means it stops helping you adapt to life. The standard is not just high. The standard becomes a threat. In that version, a mistake is not useful information, it is shame. You miss one detail, and your brain says the whole thing is ruined. You get one criticism, and your brain says everyone can see through you. You begin badly, and your brain says you should not have begun at all. This is the all or nothing mind, perfect or worthless, impressive or embarrassing. Finished beautifully or not worth starting, the all or nothing mind sounds strict, but underneath it is terrified. It does not trust gradual improvement. It does not trust messy beginnings. It does not trust the slow, ordinary path by which humans actually get good at things. Think about a child learning to walk. No one expects the first step to be elegant. No one says, if you cannot cross the room with perfect posture, do not bother standing up. The child falls, adjusts, tries again, falls differently, and slowly builds a map of balance. Learning requires error. Your brain hates that sentence when your worth is attached to your performance. Because if error is evidence that you are learning, it is useful. But if error is evidence that you are not enough, it becomes dangerous. Carol Dweck's work on fixed and growth mindsets helps explain this. In a fixed mindset, ability feels like something you either have or do not have. Performance becomes proof of identity. In a growth mindset, ability can develop through effort, strategy, feedback, and time. Perfectionism often grows in the soil of a fixed mindset. If you believe talent should look effortless, then effort itself becomes suspicious. If you believe smart people get things right quickly, then struggling feels like exposure. If you believe good work should arrive clean and complete, then every messy draft feels like a betrayal of who you hoped you were. So the perfectionist brain tries to skip the messy middle. It wants the final version without the ugly draft. It wants skill without practice. It wants success without the public evidence of learning. But the messy middle is not an obstacle to mastery. It is the place where mastery is built. Psychologists Paul Hewitt and Gordon Flett described three broad forms of perfectionism. Self-oriented perfectionism means you demand perfection from yourself. Other-oriented perfectionism means you demand perfection from other people. Socially prescribed perfectionism means you believe other people demand perfection from you. That third one can be especially heavy. It is the feeling that the world is watching with a clipboard. Your parents, your teachers, your boss, your audience. Your friends, the imagined crowd inside your head. You may not even know whose approval you are chasing anymore. You only know that falling short feels unsafe. And modern life gives that fear endless fuel. Your ancestors compared themselves to the people in one village. You compare yourself to thousands of polished lives, edited faces, public achievements, perfect desks, perfect bodies, perfect morning routines, perfect careers, perfect relationships, and perfect before and after stories. You do not see the deleted drafts. You do not see the failed attempts. You do not see the years of awkward practice. You see the final image. Then your brain compares it to your beginning. That comparison is cruel because it is not comparing two real things. It is comparing someone else's highlight reel to your private construction site. Thomas Curran and Andrew Hill analyzed generational changes in perfectionism and found that perfectionistic tendencies have risen among young people over recent decades, especially the sense that society demands perfection. The exact reasons are complex, but the pattern fits the world many people feel. More comparison, more pressure, more visible success, and less room to be quietly unfinished. So your perfectionism may not be just a private flaw. It may be your brain adapting to a culture that keeps asking you to turn yourself into a product. Be excellent, be effortless, be visible, be unique. Be successful, be relaxed about it. That is an impossible command, and when the command is impossible, your brain may choose stillness. This is the counterintuitive twist. Perfectionism can create the exact thing it fears. You want to avoid bad work, so you make no work. You want to avoid criticism, so you never gather feedback. You want to protect your potential, so you never test it. You want to look capable, so you avoid the practice that would make you capable. The perfect standard becomes a locked door, and you are both the prisoner and the guard. This is why perfectionism and procrastination often walk together. Procrastination says later, perfectionism says only when it can be flawless. Together they create a beautiful excuse, not yet, not like this. Not until you are ready. But readiness is often something you build after you begin. You do not become ready and then start. You start and the starting slowly makes you ready. The perfectionist brain does not like that. It wants certainty first. It wants the guarantee that the effort will be worth it. It wants proof that the result will be impressive before it risks making anything unimpressive. But life rarely gives that proof in advance. The first version is usually not proof of your talent. It is proof that you have entered reality. Reality is rough. Reality is rough. Reality has spelling mistakes. Reality has awkward proportions. Reality has confusing notes, weak openings, bad sketches, and first attempts that look nothing like the shining thing in your mind. That gap hurts. But the gap is not a sign that you are failing. The gap is the workspace. Everything good passes through that gap. A song begins as a few uncertain sounds. A drawing begins as ugly lines. A business begins as a clumsy offer. A body gets stronger through repeated movements that once felt embarrassing. A skill becomes graceful only after being awkward for a long time. Your perfectionism wants to hide the awkward stage, but hiding it also hides the path. So what breaks the trap? Not lowering your standards into carelessness. Not pretending quality does not matter. Not telling yourself you should stop caring. The escape is to change the job of the first attempt. The first attempt is not supposed to be good. It is supposed to exist. Its job is not to impress. Its job is to give you something to work with. Its job is to move the idea from the fog of imagination into the physical world, where it can be seen, questioned, shaped, cut, repaired, and improved. You can call it a rough draft. You can call it version 0. You can call it a bad first pancake. The name matters less than the permission. You are allowed to make something bad on purpose. This sounds simple. For a perfectionist brain, it can feel radical because bad on purpose removes the courtroom. It tells your brain this is not evidence of your worth. This is raw material. If the first paragraph is bad, good. Now you know what needs changing. If the first sketch is awkward, good. Now your eye has something to correct. If the first plan is unrealistic, good. Now reality has answered, bad work is not the opposite of good work. Often it is the beginning of good work. Another way out is to separate standards from self-attack. A standard says this part can be better. Self-attack says you are pathetic for making it this way. A standard points to the work. Self-attack points to your identity. One can help you improve. The other makes your brain want to escape. You can be serious about quality without being cruel to yourself. In fact, cruelty often damages quality because it makes honest practice feel dangerous. The best creators, athletes, scientists, and builders are not people who never make mistakes. They are people who can stay in contact with mistakes long enough to learn from them. That is the skill perfectionism often blocks staying. Staying with the bad sentence. Staying with the uncomfortable feedback. Staying with the beginner stage. staying with the gap between what you imagined and what your hands can currently make. You do not need to love the gap. You only need to stop treating it as proof that you should quit. There is a quiet freedom in making the first version deliberately small. Write one ugly paragraph. Record one awkward take. Draw one incorrect outline. Send one imperfect question. Practice one clumsy repetition. Not because small things are magical, but because small things are less threatening. They let your nervous system learn that imperfection is survivable. No tribe throws you out. No identity collapses. No final verdict arrives. There is just the work. And the next version. This is how perfectionism slowly loses its disguise. At first, it looked like a guardian of excellence. Then you notice how often it keeps you from doing the very things that would make you better. It tells you it is protecting your standards, but sometimes it is protecting your fear. Your best work will probably not come from waiting until you feel flawless. It will come from building a relationship with imperfection that is calm enough to keep going. That does not mean you stop caring. It means you care about the process enough to let it be real. Real work begins messy. Real learning includes error. Real skill is built in public and private, slowly, awkwardly, and repeatedly. The perfect version in your head is not the enemy. It can be a compass, but it should not be a weapon. Let it point. Do not let it punish. So the next time you open a blank document and the perfect version appears in your mind, you may feel that old pressure again. You may want to wait. You may want to research more. You may want to protect the idea by never testing it, but this time you can do something different. You can make the first version small enough to survive. You can make it bad enough to begin. You can remind your brain that imperfect action is not humiliation. It is how humans learn. Then you can write one sentence, not the perfect sentence, the first one.